Ask an AI chatbot almost anything, and it will answer instantly, fluently, and with total confidence. Ask it to recommend a book, and it might name a real one. Or it might give you a title that sounds perfect by a real author that was never actually written. Ask it for a court case to support an argument, and it may hand you one, complete with a name, a date, a judge, and a quote that is entirely, completely invented. People call this an AI hallucination. And it is not some rare malfunction. In a sense, it is happening every single time the machine speaks. So the real question is not why an AI sometimes makes things up. It is why it ever tells you the truth at all. In 2023, a New York lawyer found this out the hard way. Preparing a case, he asked ChatGPT to find legal precedents, and it gave him several confidently, each with a citation. He put them into an official court filing. There was just one problem. The cases did not exist. The AI had invented them, names, numbers, quotes, and all, and the lawyer ended up sanctioned by the court. It is a perfect illustration of the single strangest thing about these machines. They can be most convincing at the exact moment they are most wrong. To understand why, you have to understand what an AI is actually doing when it answers you. And it is almost nothing like what it looks like. Let me start by killing the popular picture, because it is completely wrong. When you ask a large language model a question, it is not looking anything up. There is no library inside it, no database of facts it searches, no quiet reference desk where it checks whether a thing is true. That is simply not how it works. What it is actually doing is far stranger and far simpler. It is predicting the next word. That is, almost unbelievably, the entire trick. A large language model is a system trained on an enormous quantity of human text, books, articles, websites, conversations, and from all of it, it has learned to do one thing extraordinarily well. Given a stretch of words, it can estimate what word is most likely to come next. You type your question, and the model begins, asking itself over and over, what word would most plausibly come next here, and then the next, and the next, assembling its answer one piece at a time, like the most sophisticated autocomplete ever built. It is not retrieving an answer. It is generating the most plausible-sounding continuation of your text. And once you really absorb that, the mystery of hallucination turns inside out, because the model is not trying to tell the truth. It was never trained to tell the truth. It was trained to be plausible, to produce text that looks and sounds like what a knowledgeable human would write. Now here is the saving grace, the only reason any of this is useful at all. Most of the time, the most plausible-sounding answer also happens to be the true one. Why? Because the model learned from human writing, and a great deal of human writing is roughly correct. So truth comes out as a kind of side effect. The machine tells you true things not because it knows they are true, but because true things are usually what a human would most plausibly write next. But sometimes, the most plausible-sounding answer is not the true one. And when that happens, the machine says it anyway, with exactly the same fluency and confidence, because it cannot tell the difference. It has no idea which of its statements are facts and which are fabrications, because inside the model, they are made of precisely the same stuff. A real court case and an invented one look identical to a language model, as long as the invented one has the right shape, a plausible name, a plausible court, a plausible date. The model is not lying to you. Lying means knowing the truth and choosing to say otherwise. The model has no concept of truth to betray. It only has a concept of plausible. This is exactly why a hallucination is so dangerous. When the model invents a research paper, it does not produce something obviously fake. It generates a title that sounds just like a real paper in that field, by authors who really do work in that field, in a journal that really exists. It is a flawless forgery, because the machine is, at its core, a plausibility engine, and a plausible forgery is precisely the thing it is built to make. The very same machinery that writes you a beautiful, accurate summary of the French Revolution is the machinery that will write you a beautiful, fluent, entirely fictional one. And from the inside, it feels no different at all. So in a real sense, the model is always hallucinating. Every answer it gives is conjured the same way, generated from statistical patterns, never looked up. We only call it a hallucination when the conjuring drifts away from the truth. The fluent correct answers and the fluent false ones are not two different processes. They are one single process, landing in two different places. And this is not unique to chatbots. It is why an AI image generator, asked for a human hand, will so often give you one with 6 or 7 fingers. It was never counting fingers. It learned what hands tend to look like, pinkish, with a cluster of pinkish bits at the end of an arm, and it renders something plausibly hand-shaped, with no underlying knowledge that hands have exactly 5. Text or images, it is the same root cause. The machine produces the plausible, not the true, and it cannot tell when the two come apart. So why does it drift? Why not just memorize everything correctly and be done with it? A few reasons, and they are all baked into how these systems work. First, the model does not store its training text word for word. It compresses it, smooths it, blends it into patterns, much the way you remember the gist of a book without recalling the exact sentences. And just like your memory, that compression introduces errors, fusing two half-remembered facts into one confident, wrong one. Second, the training data itself is full of human mistakes, myths, outdated claims, and flat contradictions, and the model absorbs all of it. And third, when you ask about something rare or obscure, or that simply does not exist, there is no strong pattern for the model to lean on, so it does what it always does. It fills the gap with the most plausible-looking words it can find. It would rather hand you a confident guess than admit a blank, because admitting a blank was never something it was trained to do. In fact, the closest thing to this in our own minds is not lying, but confabulation. When a person's memory has a gap, the brain often fills it in, smoothly and confidently, with a plausible detail that never happened, and the person genuinely believes it. They are not lying. They simply cannot feel the difference between the real memory and the manufactured one. A language model does something similar with every single answer, except that it has no memories to begin with and no awareness at all. It is, in a sense, pure confabulation all the way down, and it happens to be right most of the time only because plausible and true so often line up. Now here is where it gets genuinely speculative, and I will be honest about what we do and do not know. The biggest open question in AI right now is whether hallucination can ever be truly eliminated, or whether it is a permanent feature of how these machines think. There are two camps. One camp says it is fixable, or at least tameable. Give the model real tools, they argue. Let it search the actual web or pull from a verified database and ground its answers in retrieved documents instead of pure memory, an approach called retrieval-augmented generation. Train it to recognize its own uncertainty and to say, "I am not sure," instead of bluffing. These methods genuinely help, and the best modern systems hallucinate noticeably less than the ones from just a few years ago. The other camp says you can reduce hallucination, but you can never fully remove it because it is not a flaw sitting on top of the system. It is the system. The exact same creative, generative, gap-filling ability that makes these models so powerful, so good at writing, brainstorming, and handling situations they have never seen before, is inseparable from their tendency to invent. Take away the capacity to generate plausible new things, and you take away the usefulness right along with it. In that view, a language model that could not hallucinate would be a language model that could barely do anything at all. And that points at the deepest and most unsettling part of all this. The catch. The model does not know when it is hallucinating. It cannot reliably warn you which of its answers to trust because it experiences no difference between them. There is no little alarm inside that trips when it crosses from fact into fiction. That confidence you hear, that smooth, fluent, authoritative tone, is not a signal that it is right. It is simply the default texture of everything the machine says, present in exactly equal measure when it is brilliant and when it is dead wrong. So how do you protect yourself? The rule is simple, even if it cuts against instinct. Stop treating fluency as a sign of truth. The confidence, the polish, the authoritative tone, none of it is evidence of anything at all. Anything that actually matters, a fact, a number, a name, a quote, a citation, you verify against a real, independent source. And be most careful, not least, when the answer is confident and specific. because specificity is exactly where the machine has the most room to invent and the most convincing place to do it. You can even ask the model for its sources, but then you have to check that the sources are real because, as our lawyer discovered, it will happily invent those too. Used well, as a brilliant, tireless, slightly unreliable assistant whose every claim you confirm, these tools are extraordinary. Trusted blindly, they are a beautifully worded trap. So, why does AI hallucinate? Because it was never built to know things. It was built to predict plausible words, and most of the time, plausible and true happen to overlap, which is the entire reason it is useful. But when they come apart, the machine cannot feel the seam. It hands you the fabrication in the very same voice as the fact and waits, perfectly confident, for your next question. That is how AI thinks. The science here is real. These systems predict, they do not retrieve. They optimize for plausibility, not for truth. Whether that gap can ever be fully closed is the open question the entire field is wrestling with right now. And until it is, the single most important thing to understand about an artificial intelligence is also the simplest. When it sounds the most certain, that is exactly the moment to check.